Thank you everybody for coming in today to Going Passwordless with Azure AD and Keytos. And today we're going to be talking about how easy it is to go passwordless. It's no longer just a buzzword. It's actually something actionable that will help you. And today we have me, Igal Flegmann, co-founder and CEO of Keytos. I was a little bit about myself. I was an ex-Microsoft engineer working in PKI and identity. And after a few years, I left to co-found Keytos, where we do identity and PKI solutions to make it easier to work with Microsoft. And today we're honored to have Natee here. So Natee, take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you. My name is Natee, and I am part of our Microsoft Identity team. So if you think about Azure AD, that's the product that my team work on. So very excited to talk to you all, as well as co-present with Keytos team here around our passwordless story. Maybe we can go to the next slide to kick it off. So I think many of you might have heard before about why passwords are not amazing, right? It's very expensive, and when you think about the impact that the passwords have in the market, like people are reusing it all the time, which can cause a security risk, right? And phishing attacks are still really, happening all over. So passwords are the weak link for many breach, right? And data breaches are expensive, so we have some stat there, right? 3.86 million on average on the cost of the breach, right? And in reality, when it comes down to password change or any issue with password, it generates a tons of support calls. So from what we have seen, we have a high number of help desk calls that are related to password, 30 to 50%. And the next slide, we're going to go through a bit of what is passwordless, because people might have different definition, and we want to cover like 3 key things about passwordless, so we are on the same page. One, we know that like I mentioned on the previous slide, passwords are still not amazing and quite expensive. So the passwordless here, we really want to help you and our customer to remove attack vector that are related to password, like phishing attack, for example, right? Second one, we are hoping to also like improve a better user experience, because today, when you have to go through like your password and you might forget about it, you have to kind of do like the dance around it, and that's not good, right? And the third one, which is quite important, we really want to make sure that in addition to a great user experience, we want to provide strong authentication method for you, especially device-based, right? So think about Windows Hello for Business, FIDO2 security key, Microsoft Authenticator apps, and we also now have Azure AD certificate-based authentication. So many organizations that have smart card, you can now use it with Azure AD natively. And I know many of you might use our Azure AD CBA on, using your smart card with ADFS, but in reality, now we have Azure AD, so you can move it from ADFS to Azure AD pretty easily. Next slide, please. I just talked about this here. So all in all, when Microsoft talk about passwordless authentication methods, we have 4 methods for our customer to choose from. One, if you use Windows device that have Windows Hello for Business capability, that's one option for you. Second one is our Microsoft Authenticator app. We also recognize that is easier because many people have phone, right? So you can just install it and use it just fine. In fact, earlier this week, we also announced that we released the public preview or private preview version of Microsoft Authenticator app on Outlook. So basically, if some user who don't have Microsoft Authenticator app yet, but they have Outlook, they can actually use Authenticator from Outlook app right away. So that's fantastic. And for customers who feel like they need to have a restricted policy, for example, like call center, you don't want to bring a cell phone to the call center, because then people might be able to collect data, or they might violate some of the regulations. We also start to see more people started using FIDO2 security key or smart card, or what we call it here is Azure AD certificate-based authentication. So these are 4 options that we have available for all kinds of use cases. And if you click to the next one here, you can see, I think this is a stat from a few years ago. We have over 200 million plus active passwordless user all across consumer and enterprise customers. So that's pretty exciting. So you can see like this is not just the buzzword anymore. A lot of our customers are using it. Like I'm using it here at Microsoft as well. So pretty exciting time to evaluate your plan to move forward. So next slide, please.
And also, I just want to add in
And
that like
please.
part of the reason that so many people are using it, it's because it's actually easier. So like a lot of people like are usually afraid of it because they're like, oh, YubiKey or like Windows Authenticator, all these other things that I have to use. But honestly, like it's faster. You don't have to remember that password. You don't have to change it. You don't have to do anything. It can be as simple as literally having a face if you're using Windows Hello.
Yes.
Like if you have a face, you can authenticate. So
yeah, definitely. And one thing here too as well, like we also heard the buzz around passkey. We are also actively working on it so that all of you can enjoy the experience with passkey with Azure AD as well. So kind of to step back, apart from all the authentication methods I mentioned to you earlier, right? We don't want to just provide you the factors of passwordless and then have you figure out how to use it. We actually make it easier within Azure AD to enable a good experience for you. Like one, obviously you can use all of these factor and options as a first factor or second factor, right, to sign into all kinds of application and resources. Second one, we also want to be able to allow you to manage the policy, see the activity report on Azure AD. Like for example, if there are certain users that are high risk, like security team or executive team, you can use what we call Azure AD conditional access auth string to mandate those high risk users to must use selected method only. Like for example, I can say Igal and Natee must use FIDO2 security key only when they access anything on Azure AD. That's doable. So I would encourage you to look at that because that is a secret sauce for a successful passwordless rollout, as well as help a ton in terms of prevent all the attack for selected audience in the company. Third one, we also integrate FIDO2 hardware to meet all kinds of needs, because if you look at the list of different form factors on Microsoft Azure AD website, we, I think, have over 20 vendors now with variety of form factor for you to choose from, like from the likes of YubiKey to like, ring type to band type. Like there's a lot of things that we work with these hardware vendor to give you variety of options. And at the end, we also know that sometimes you want to use API to automate a bunch of policy of configure auth method, or if you are technology providers or technology vendors, you can use this API to basically enrich your application. Like for example, I talked to one of the startup in the Bay Area. They help customer to manage auth method policy in multiple tenants. They can actually use our API to enforce auth strength to like 5 or 10 tenants, because many companies have like thousands of locations sometimes, or sometimes have hundreds Azure AD tenants, and that's never easy to manage one by one. So having the API and the ability for you to configure yourself, that's something we think hard about, and now we have something for you. Cool. Next slide, please. So, I talk a lot about FIDO2 security key. One thing that Microsoft really strongly believe in is we need to work on anything that had to do with standard. We don't want to just create custom solution every time, and then everyone had to work on our own, custom integration of protocols, right? So things like Windows Hello for Business, we use FIDO2 as well. So what I want to say here is that apart from the standard commitment that we have, we do believe in the FIDO2 standard as the standard for all kinds of passwordless integration. And in this case, right, for FIDO2 standard is the promise here is to provide strong authentication that is phishing resistant and user friendly and have privacy component into it. And FIDO2 standard here have two protocols that work well together. One is WebAuthn, and the second one is CTAP protocol. So all in all, there's a lot of things that we are doing with the final standard alliances, even the past key conversations. So if you have any feedback, or anything you want to improve the experience on, we also have the team that work with standard inside out. So looking forward to also hear some of your feedback at the end of the call here. Next slide, please. Awesome. Okay, this is the critical slide because many people who I've talked to, even earlier as last week, while the vision is very beautiful to go passwordless, but in reality, it requires a very thoughtful deployment plan because it's a journey, especially for large organizations that have legacy app, have a bunch of technical debt in a way that you have to think through. First thing first, it's important for you to have strong presence on Azure AD, right? If you want to use our passwordless technology, it's important for us to be the main control plane. And as you use Azure AD, the next step that many people try to think through is what are the apps that you have to connect with Azure AD, right? And you have to connect all of them really well. Many people start with Microsoft 365 because it's embedded with Azure AD really well. Then start with other third-party apps like Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow of the world, right? And you also have to think about all the legacy app. Can you use it to integrate with Azure AD App Proxy or not? If not, we also have a rich set of partners through the Secure Hyper-Access program to connect with legacy app, because not all the protocol that actually support, like Radius, for example. So that's something we also have great partnership there to help you bring all the app to Azure AD. Obviously, the third one, you have to have the right device, the right platform ready. Like if you want to use Windows Hello for Business, you have to have the right device. If you want to use, smart card, obviously those are additional hardware. You have to use it to integrate with us. But in reality, we also have, Authenticator app for you to use. That also means that your end user must also have mobile phone to use it correctly. So these are, top of mind as you think about rolling out passwordless. And the next phase, as you complete these three buckets of important tasks, next is how do you want to securely bootstrap credential? Because when you have new employee coming in, or if your employee lost credential, these are hard problems, right? You don't want to onboard remote employee and give them credential that can get to other people. So right now, Azure AD, we have what we call temporary access pass. So IT admin can easily generate a temporary passcode for the new employee to create a new account. You can also think about how do you incorporate it with identity proofing, right? Because that's where you want to really prove who those users are before you give the code for them to generate a new account. And the next part is how do you drive the new user to drive registration. We also have My Security Info portal for you to do that. And at the end, it's all about learning. How do you track the rollout, the feedback from end user? Do you have to provide additional training and then track usage over time? So these are 6 key things that we recommend you to think about as you roll out passwordless. And everyone have different journey. This is just an example of what we have seen as the common trend of how people go through their passwordless deployment journey. Cool. You got anything to add from your side based on your experience seeing customer deploying passwordless?
Yeah, so I think you hit it right on the head, and that's one of the things that people don't realize is once you already have Azure AD, you're more than halfway there. Like if you already are in Azure AD, you're one mini step away from going passwordless, because some of the people that we have talked to, like we're like, hey, are you going passwordless? And they're like, oh, that's 2 years down the line. And then I'm like, let's jump into a 15-minute call. And then I'm just like, you just have to do this, this, and this. We can deploy and be up and running. And people are like, oh, okay, sure. And like our record right now is 2 weeks from discovery call to fully passwordless for a small company. And we're trying to beat that record. So if anybody in the call is trying to move faster to passwordless, we're happy to help. And yeah, I think that's a perfect transition also, since you were talking about bootstrapping, on how we can actually help with on the bootstrapping and everything. I'll cover that in the next slide. However, first I want to talk about the obstacles that most people talk about. So the first one that most people tell me when they're talking about passwordless is cost. And no one is thinking of the $3.8 million that it can cost you to get hacked, because everybody's thinking that's not going to happen to me. That's going to happen to someone else. That's not going to happen to me. So let's take that 3.8 million out of the table and let's just talk about regular cost. And Forrester's did a study, pretty interesting, that actually going passwordless with keys is 203. You get your ROI back in 3 years, 203%. Which, if you ask me, where would I invest my money to get 203% in 3 years? There's not many places. And the reason for that is, yes, there is an upfront investment. There's the keys. There's the onboarding software. There's maybe some like licenses you might have to purchase for Azure AD. However, once you have it auto create and you have your users self bootstrap and everything, you start saving costs, not only on the IT desk that will help you bootstrap, but also in game productivity. Right now, if someone forgets their password, they have to do all these other things and they have to change their password every quarter. If they go passwordless, it can be a minute and they're up and running, even if they forget their password, or they might have like their Windows Hello and they just have to stare at their computer. And another thing that Natee mentioned is not everybody needs a key. Well, yes, YubiKeys are comfortable and like easy to use and everything. It might not be for everybody. We have had organizations that have like YubiKeys for their engineers and maybe their C-level people, but then the other people use the other Microsoft authenticators. So like they have their phone or they have their Windows Hello, and it's not mutually exclusive. You can have all three. So in our corporate tenant, we use all of them. In our production tenant, and it goes to having multiple tenants, we use FIDO2 keys and certificate-based authentication only. Then the next question, the next problem we hear is logistics. So usually this is managed by IT teams. IT teams are great at managing servers, having uptime, making them secure and everything. But all of a sudden, we're just changing the onboarding experience of like, hey, here's a paper, go sign up with your one-time password, to, oh, we have to send you a key. And like now everybody's remote because work from home and COVID and everything. And not only from home in the same office, in the same location, all over the world. So you have to have that logistics to send the keys, send the computers. And as you mentioned, make sure that it doesn't get swapped in the mail, or like, how do you know you're getting the code to the right thing? So in there, we have actually some logistics software that was like made for helping customers like distribute that. And we even offer a logistics project. So you can either use Keytos to have our team send the YubiKeys for you, and you don't even have to worry about that. You worry about your actual job. And also, we are integrating with Yubico's Yubi Enterprise Delivery for them to also deliver. So basically, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for everybody. And then the next one that everybody talks about is PKI management. So managing those HSMs, managing all that infrastructure. And as Natee said, ADFS servers, Krill servers, all those servers, they go away. With Azure CBA, you can, and EasyCA, you can have everything in the cloud. So just going to Azure, creating a few resources, and you're up and running, and you have certificate-based authentication in a few minutes. And last is onboarding that we kind of covered a little bit. And there's self-service onboarding. And we support with Government ID and Azure MFA. So this one I like more showing instead of just telling you like, hey, like this is how it would work. You'll see why I do it in a video, because if not, I would have to connect my cell phone into the computer. So basically, here is our application, and a new user would come in. If it's the first time they're logging in, they would scan a QR code. This will open their phone. I'm gonna fast forward here. It'll open their phone. They'll scan their face. We'll verify that that's the person that they say they are. We're gonna scan their ID, make sure that that matches what you have in HR, and then they can onboard either their Microsoft Authenticator app, they can onboard their FIDO2 key, or their smart card authentication. Another way to do it is with Azure MFA. If they already have an existing account, either in the same tenant, or as Natee mentioned, there's companies with hundreds of tenants. It would be crazy to ask you, hey, scan your face 100 times. So what we do is, if you have your corporate tenant you trust, you can use that with conditional access and everything to make sure that you're the person that you are, and then you request a key. One of the magic things that Easy Smart Card does is not only we walk you through the experience, so you don't have to think of like, oh, I have to teach everybody and like they have to read. No, like we show them with a video, like, hey, this is what you have to do. Press the key when this happens. Do this. And what is happening in the backend is we are creating a FIDO2 key as well as a smart card. So there is no more like the thinking of like, do I want FIDO2? Do I want smart card? It's actually both of them. Pretty straightforward. And in here, I'm going to show how like I just will go to the website. First, I'm going to log in using the smart card. And this is great if you have on-premise. So on-premise, you can just use your smart card authentication. And for the cloud, you can use either smart card and FIDO2. So here I'm logging in with a smart card, pretty straightforward with the YubiKey I just created. And then, it'll just log in. And then the next one, I'm going to use the FIDO2 key. So this gives you the flexibility to do it. And then after this, I'm going to go in and set up my phone authenticator app. So all of a sudden, I have 3 methods. And then I just have to go into the Windows settings, set up my Windows Hello, and I have 4 passwordless authentication methods in a minute. I forget my password. I don't have to call anybody. I still have my ID. I still have my face. I can just verify it again. Or I might have a cookie, or I might have a Windows Authenticator. So you can always bootstrap again, and we'll guide you through everything and do everything for you. So that's kind of it. I would keep going and show a little bit of the logistics management, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So if you want to see that, make sure to let us know and we'll be happy to show it to you. One of the advantages with Easy Smart Card, we're ready to go with Azure. So as you have heard the whole time, we're talking about Azure AD. Like, we're not creating some crazy FIDO, how Natee was saying about like the standards. We're just going with the leader, the one that has the majority of the market, and we're just enabling you to use them better. So we're ready to go to Azure. You just go to Azure, search for Easy Smart Card, and you create it as if you were creating an Azure VM. And all of a sudden, you have your onboarding experience. We're compatible with all 3 Azure AD passwordless authentication methods, and we are fully integrated into the Microsoft Identity Platform. We even issue SCEP certificates for Intune if you're using for VPN or anything else on cell phones. And also, we reduce 92% of credential support calls, because with self-service onboarding, there's no calling like, hey, I forgot my password. Hey, how do I do this? They just go and do it. So now I want to open it up for questions. So if anybody has any questions, please do it in the chat. So I'm going to open with the first one. So I talked about Cloud CA. Do we support ADCS? And the answer is absolutely yes. So if you already have your PKI and you just want to have this amazing onboarding experience, all you need is an IIS server that connects to your PKI. We'll send a request there, and we'll create smart cards with your ADCS. So that's that's a fair question. If anybody else have any other questions, we're happy to answer them. Seems we have covered everything.
Good. By the way, one thing that you mentioned earlier around, logistic with your solution, like what do you mean by logistic? Because it sounds complicated when many customers want to roll out security keys or other hardware type. Like, can you explain more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll actually go here. So one of the things would be you would have to set up kind of like a ticketing system to request the YubiKey and like do all that stuff. Instead, we have it built in. So when you come here, you can request a smart card on behalf either for yourself or on behalf of someone else. So like if you're hiring someone new and they need a smart card, you just request it. We'll send it to them into their address. Don't really have to do much, and you click request. Now, how does this look for your admins? So your admins would go to the Easy Smart Card application, and they would go to manage smart cards, and here they would see assign new smart card. So And here I can see there's one for Nicole. I can click assign. One of the main things that I love, it might be just like the lazy person in me, is we auto-populate the serial number for you. So right now I have that smart card plugged into my computer, so we will automatically do it. So you don't have to type it. And this is attached to the user. So if someone tries to swap it or something in the mail, it won't work. So you will know that you have a supply chain attack. They'll get it, and then they just have to go here and request the smart card. So it is a pretty straightforward process. We also have like the create smart card if you want to like create the certificate and then just give them the puck to unblock. So it is kind of like a very simple creation method.
Awesome. That looks cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, we just like adding into the Azure AD. We're not reinventing anything. We're just making it easier to use Azure CVA, Azure FIDO, and Azure Authenticator app.
That's great. I love the fact that you also think about how to make sure that people don't just get the smart card and then somebody else just use it. So you have like a bit of protection there, from what you showed us earlier.
Yeah. So that adds that extra, because back in the day it was okay. Yeah, like chances of someone breaking through your security of the building and like impersonating someone else and doing all these other things was very low. Now we live in a distributed world where we're sending these cards everywhere, and like there's governments using this, there's like high companies using this, that it is worth trying to swap, like for an attacker might be worth that attack vector, that supply chain vector. So that's how we protect and ensure that the right person is getting the right YubiKey, and that they're also not using one they bought off Walmart or a random person on the internet.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess because we have a minute left, maybe I can ask one question for you again. I think Keytos brand is a bit newer in the market. Like, can you maybe share about maybe any customer success story that used Keytos and Azure AD deployment successfully? You don't have to name any name, but at least like sharing what you've seen so far, how they use it, and what problem they solve successfully.
Yeah, so one of my favorite ones is this logistics company that they just called me and they were like, "Hey, we have to go passwordless. One of our customers is asking us to go passwordless, and we honestly have no clue. We're good at logistics, but we're not good at security." And we went in, talked to the people, figure out what they needed, and as I said, we ended up doing a hybrid of YubiKeys plus Authenticator app, and we were able to deploy it. So this is one of the main things that I like about this story, is that it wasn't a huge corporation that like they're like, "Oh yeah, we have 30 people in IT doing this." It was a really small company with one overworked IT person, and we were able to do it and actually like make it fairly straightforward for them. So passwordless is not only here, it's here for everybody, from the smallest company in the world to the largest company in the world can be fully passwordless. So
Nice.
yeah, with that, I think it's perfect to close it out at 12:30 on the dot. So thank you so much for joining us, Natee. And thank you everybody else for joining. Hope you learned a lot in this webinar.
Thank you, everyone.